This is The Point, news from Noise, daily market call presented by Kattan Ferretti Financial. I'm your CEO, Brad Roth, and I look forward to having a daily discussion with you over the topics that we present in this note every single morning. So without further ado, The Point.
Good morning, Cameron. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. How'd you play last night?
Well, not too bad. Avoided the rain, so it's always good just to get out. So
yeah, that's great news, man. Good for you. Let's fire away with the news, man. Let's get this Rockin' Friday rocking.
All right, let's do it. All 34 major banks passed their annual stress tests yesterday, though requirements are beginning to be less stringent. The U.S. Treasury's proposal to unleash financial sector animal spirits constrained over the last 7 years by the weight of regulations is already sweeping through markets. Today is likely to be one of the busiest of the year for U.S. equity traders as the annual Russell 2000 index rebalancing is today. James Bullard, Loretta Mester, and Jerome Powell kept a busy week for speeches from Fed policymakers. As Bullard told the Wall Street Journal, the rate trajectory the FOMC has laid out seems unnecessarily aggressive, and the balance sheet unwind should start sooner rather than later. Manufacturing data and new home sales will be reported this morning at 9:45 and 10 a.m. respectively. Next week sees a good deal of economic data due to be released in the U.S., including personal income and spending, inflation measures, and most importantly, GDP updates. Outside the U.S., European stock markets were lower as oil prices remained near their lows and as food and beverage companies traded lower after a research report about Heineken from Stifel Financial. In Europe, Brexit talks are focused on residency rights and clearing of euro-denominated financial instruments. European Central Bank wants changes made to its mandate that would give it greater oversight of clearinghouses in the region. UK stocks saw the fourth day of losses even as the pound rose as Brexit negotiations are underway, as it is also the one-year anniversary of the Brexit vote. Outgoing policymaker Kristen Forbes said the Bank of England is too big, distracted, and has conflicts of interest. The French GDP in manufacturing was reported better than expected, while prices for purchasing managers were lower than expected. In German manufacturing, results were stronger than expected, while prices for purchasing managers were lower than anticipated. Industrial and Commercial Bank of China said its checks of loans to companies that made overseas acquisitions is routine and not an effort to look closely at acquisition firms. China Vanke Company surged by the 10% daily limit in Shenzhen after Sanford C. Bernstein & Company raised its rating on the stock and increased its price target by 60%. Chinese gas companies rallied Friday, led by China Resources Gas Group, 10% gain after China announced new rules for the industry. And lastly, while a survey said that Asian investors are looking to take on more risk, CNBC reports that their portfolios may indicate otherwise. Now, Bobby, something me and maybe some listeners might be a little curious about are what exactly are these bank stress tests? And tell us a little bit more about this CNN pre-market news brief.
We'll start with the first one, which is really good to talk about, and then the disaster that are these morning news briefs that get published on the internet. But the stress tests were implemented after the crash in 2007 and 2008 to make sure that big banks have enough liquidity to withstand another financial crisis of some measure, right? So unemployment now I think is at 4.3%. These stress tests are meant to say, okay, if something drastic happened in the economy and unemployment spiked to somewhere around 10%, could these big banks be self-sustainable with the amount of cash that they have on hand? The problem is those stress tests, they're annual and they're pretty much set up for the banks to pass, right? So as an analogy, a while ago, I'd in one of my previous businesses, we were looking to just make a small expansion. We talked to like a community lender. This is maybe 5 years ago or something like that. And the point of a community lender is to basically step in where banks won't, right? To lend to like young businesses or businesses without a track record. And I asked them, one of the questions was, well, like, how many of your companies, that you fund fail? And they said, honestly, only 1 in 15 years. And they said that with excitement, which was to me a disaster. That is a company that is set up to lend to riskier businesses so that there is some innovation in smaller communities, right? That means, and it's used with public money and with foundation dollars especially, right? So the people that set up these foundations, the Heinz, the Carnegies, those folks, they wanted to see some risk taken on in smaller communities. So if a certain percentage aren't failing within those portfolios, then they're not doing their job and they're not lending to the riskier businesses that they're supposed to be lending. And that mandate is why they charge a slightly higher interest rate. So they're taking that higher interest rate without doing their job or actually benefiting the community. When all 34 are passing and when they're making these requirements less stringent, that means the stress test isn't doing its job. They shouldn't all be coming out with just this pass or fail. This should be something that has a whole lot more insight into it than that, into what our big banks are doing. In case, everyone forgot, the entire global economy was obliterated because of the risky actions these big banks would take with money they were not supposed to be using for those actions. So I don't like these results. I don't like that the U.S. Treasury is going the way of eliminating more of the requirements, right? And using phrases like unleashing animal spirits. What does that mean? It's going to add a lot more risk into our economy. What does that mean for the stock market right now? Not a whole lot, right? It may mean that the path for stocks to continue going higher is a little more wide open, actually. So as an investor, and when you're gauging markets, it's so important to divorce the things that we see as wrong with how and when, most importantly, they're going to affect your investment dollars, right? So it's something you keep an eye on and start watching how banks' activities are. Start watching where their profits are, and as they grow. I mean, inevitably, bank profits will continue to grow. They had the most amount of profits ever last year. That tells us a bad sign. Banks are not supposed to be giant, profitable money-making machines. They're a service and a lender. In the 50s, they were 7% of GDP, and they were somewhere around 15% of the country's growth in 2006, 2007, before the collapse. So we want companies like Amazon and technology companies. We want healthcare companies. We want consumer products companies. Those are the ones that should have big returns in a healthy economy and have innovation. We don't want – banking should be boring. If banking is exciting, there's a problem. And then to keep your eye on that, just keep in mind there are other market reports out there that are free like ours, like CNN's. It has 7 things to start your day. And most of it's useless. These 7 things that they have in here, they're missing. They highlight what's going next week. Let's take their number 7. Coming this week, BlackBerry reports earnings. Who cares? GDP comes out next week. Inflation data comes out next week. Spending data comes out next week. The 3 pillars of the U.S. economy come out next week. And CNN highlights BlackBerry. And that's it. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4 words. That's just not good enough. So
tell us how you really feel.
Dude, I'm just upset it's Friday already. We have so much more to do, man. It feels like a Tuesday, which is a good thing. It means grinding. We're loving the job, right?
Keep grinding.
All right. Anything in sports?
Not much.
I mean, if a guy like Lorenzo Ball can't play ball, I mean, it's kind of like, I came from the food industry and my last name's Fry.
Right.
And Brad and you were in investments and your last name's Roth. So we all better be good at these 3 things. This kid better actually come through.
Yeah, he's got a lot of pressure on him thanks to his dad, but
yeah, that guy seems a little off the charts, huh? He may not
made a name for himself.
He may not be well.
No,
there may be something very, very not well with him.
Oh man, you'd have to think so.
Well, we'll worry about all that later. For now, this was The Point. Thanks for listening on Friday. What's today's date?
June 23rd.
June 23rd. We'll see you all back here next week.